Buying bread at
It was
for
on
$1.
sale.
For $1, I think that's more too. You should see how much it's costing money. And we don't need that much
Alrighty,
bread.
today, we're gonna look at Exodus chapter 2. Last thing we heard about was Joseph ruling over his brothers. And I just lost my cap here. Now it's dirty.
Just leave it out.
Is that the way to do it? Approximately 3.5 centuries passed between the story of Joseph and the closing chapters of the book of Genesis and the account of Moses in the opening chapters of Exodus. Exodus 1 serves as a final link between these two stories. Here we are reminded that the number of Jacob's descendants who migrated to Egypt at the time of Joseph was 70 in all. We are told that Joseph's descendants, the Israelites, were fruitful and multiplied greatly, and in time the land was filled with them. We are told then of a new king in Egypt who did not remember Joseph and his kindness to the Egyptians. Because the Israelites continued to multiply, this new king had them enslaved, fearing that if Egypt came under attack, the Israelites would side with Egypt's enemy. In spite of the enslavement, however, Israel continued to grow. Following an unsuccessful attempt to curb the growth of this enslaved nation, Pharaoh issued an ominous decree. Every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. A gracious God, however, used this sinful decree and his people's faithful response to it to bring about a great blessing for the Israelites in the person of Moses. So we look at Exodus 2. Now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed a child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. When Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." All right, a couple of questions here. First one here. Why did Pharaoh target only the male babies in his decree? Why not the girls?
It takes two to create more babies.
And
Yeah,
the
but if
males
you got
were,
enough women in there, the one man can make lots of babies too.
Yep. So why kill all the boys?
because they would be the soldiers that would be fighting against the
They were the ones who were going to grow up and be soldiers. And remember, Pharaoh was worried that if an enemy attacked, what were the Israelites, he thought, were going to do? They're going to jump ship and go to the enemy. And so get rid of all the baby boys. Well, number two, what insight does Hebrews 11:23 give us regarding the actions of Moses' parents? Hebrews 11 says, by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. So, what insight do we get there? What does it tell us there that Exodus didn't?
They had faith that somehow God would save this child.
Who did they,
They
I
trusted.
want to say who did they fear more, but then we're using fear in the wrong way.
They trusted
They trusted
God
God.
more.
They
than
trusted
were afraid
God
of-
more than being afraid of Pharaoh, weren't they? So at the risk of punishment, perhaps even death, they hid the child, right? And we're also told that he was not an ordinary child. What exactly that means, I'm not sure. They saw him as a gift of God. And they trusted in God. And really what they did was an act of faith. How many of us would have done it? I don't know, to be honest with you, that I could throw my kids into the Nile River. I would find a way. Anyway,
Go to another country.
I'd probably go to another country if it came down to it.
You have to escape.
You know, there are places today where, you know, look at China. How many kids can you have?
One.
Used to be one.
I didn't
I heard
change
them
it.
change it.
They're changing it.
Pretty
If
sure.
you are wealthy,
Is that
there are
the,
stipulations.
I know there's a caveat to it. But yeah, they're looking at changing. Because part of the problem is their population is going down.
And they're killing the girls.
You know, they're losing more than they are gaining. And I'll be honest with you, if I lived in China and I got 4 kids, I would have moved out. I wouldn't kill my children. Which kind of leads to number 3 here. What does this account tell us about the regard that Moses' parents had for children and for life? And do we see that same regard in our world today? How about the first part? What did they think about children and life, Moses' parents?
Children are a gift of God and life is precious.
Life is precious. And any child, boy or girl, is a gift of God, and they valued it very highly. They were really willing to risk their lives to save a child. So, what about our world today?
No,
I mean, news is out there that the abortion rate is down. But it's not 0. There are still children being killed every day. Every, what is it, like every 20 seconds, a child is being murdered. So that's the one end of the spectrum. How about the other end?
Our end?
Yeah. Is it going to get to the point where if you're elderly, they're going to say it's better for you to die?
That could happen.
Look at the right to die stuff. What was the big stink in Texas a week or so ago?
Oh, that.
There was a car accident. I think it was a car accident, wasn't it?
yes, with the young woman.
With the young woman who was pregnant. Texas hospital by law said,
Yeah.
sorry, we got to keep her alive because there's a living baby. And they petitioned the higher courts, and the court said, nope. Baby died, didn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Of course, then you hear of one the other day where a lady was hit by a snowplow. She was pregnant.
And they took the baby.
The baby was alive. Mom died, but the baby lived. We don't think too much about life, do we? I wonder at times if we're getting to be like the Romans. They had their arena, fight till the death. Do we have that today?
Hockey.
Okay. What is that? Ultimate fighting. I've never watched it, but I've seen the ads for it. I have no desire to watch it. Basically, 2 guys get in there, 2 women do, beat themselves to a pulp. For what purpose?
I can't believe people think that's entertainment.
Romans did. Are we like them?
I can
Afraid
get
we
from
are.
here, but I really don't see a football game any different than what the Romans did.
What is the goal of football?
The pound and the
Technically,
cake.
it is to cross the finish line, or to cross the goal line. So I want to get from point A to point B. What is your job?
Beat you out.
Get me out.
Yeah.
I have a problem with boxing, too. There's a lot of things.
Wrestling is fake.
How many of you like hockey?
Tell that to a wrestler.
Anybody here like hockey? You watch it for the game or for the fights?
That's what's allowed to do.
I know people who love hockey simply for the fights.
That goes with baseball people too, they like that rhubarb.
You know, we like that, that's our sinful nature in us, right? So what do we think about life today? Not a whole lot, do we? And it's not just our country, all around the world. We were talking about China before. How about fourth? What were the benefits of having Israel's future leader grow up in the palace of the king of Egypt?
He was well educated
Okay, he was well educated.
and he knew the Egyptian language.
Okay, he knew the Egyptian language. Anything else he learned?
The culture and the protocol that needed
Yeah.
to be for.
Learn all the protocol, because that's going to play into it later, isn't it? I mean, you want to go, I remember reading an article about this. If you are going to meet the Queen of England, they sit down with you and show you the correct protocols. Things you can do and you cannot do in the Queen's presence. Moses learned all that stuff because he was going to have to stand before Pharaoh and his court. He knew what to do and what not to do. He also learned to be a leader, didn't he? And that would play into it later on, wouldn't it? Well, did we answer five? Oh, no, we didn't. What are the benefits? What benefits were there to having Israel's future leader grow up under the care of his own mom?
That's the best place to grow up.
That- Well, and he also, that religion part, instead of the idolatry that they had for the Egyptians, he learned more about that true God.
If you look at the whole aspect of it, first thing, it's best if the child learns with his parents.
There, he learns to pray to the Lord when he's a young man.
You look at the spiritual aspect of it. He got to learn about the true God. He got to learn from his mom and dad why he wasn't killed. Why wasn't he killed? Because they trusted God more. And he learned that. That was instilled in him. And of course, physical aspect is always the advantage of growing up with your parents. You know, I think of some children, some friends of mine, when their children were born, she took a week off and then they went into daycare. Look at all the things she missed. Didn't get to see the child's first step. And child turned to the daycare worker and said, "Mommy." Oops. They got to raise him. So you look at that. Anyway, I'm not going to get off the whole daycare thing. Yes?
Well, not only the parents miss, but the child. Now, I've watched, the government says one worker can care for 4 infants. How can you cuddle 4 infants at one time? I mean, it's so cold. They don't cuddle them. They feed them, put them to play or in a stroller, but not the bonding.
Cassie works, my daughter-in-law works as a substitute at a daycare child learning center in Mankato. And all of a sudden she got called in for last week and next week because they just fired somebody because she was on the phone and a child fell off a table. You want to put your children in that? Not me. You know, was it, we were fortunate, Carol was able to be a stay-at-home mom. Was it easy? No, by no means was it easy. But there was a benefit to it. All right,
How old was Moses when he went back to the Pharaoh's daughter?
I would probably guess by the time they finished weaning, probably about 5. Give or take a little. It was typically 4 to 6 years that they nursed a child. A little different than today, right?
That also gave them the opportunity to learn the Israelite language.
He learned both, didn't he? Is there an advantage with being bilingual? How many of you are bilingual?
Halfway.
There is an advantage.
I know a little Deutsch.
It's interesting, you go to a store and these people are talking and they don't know, you know the language. And I still remember one of my kids I forgot where they were working, fast food, and they knew Spanish. Somebody came in and they were going back and forth and arguing, and finally David said, "I think you would rather have this." Huh? He understood everything they were saying. Okay, all right. How about the last one here? In which details of this account do you see the hand of God? Where is God's hand in any of this?
All along.
Everywhere, right? The fact that, well, what are you going to pick on? Pick some stuff out.
He was there when the king didn't know who they were anymore and decided to.
Sure, because he was still building up his nation, wasn't he? And God still watched over them. He still protected them. How do you keep a baby quiet for 3 months?
Duct tape.
They didn't have duct tape back then.
I saw a picture
Baby
of
tape.
a father babysitting his child. He had the child duct taped to the wall. Not the way you want to do it, but how do you really keep him quiet?
He just naturally, God kept him quiet.
You can fake it. I mean, who was allowed to live?
Girls.
The girls. So you maybe pretend it was a girl. Either way, God watched over the parents. He watched over Moses when he was thrown into a little basket.
Can you imagine him laying still in that basket?
That's what I was thinking. What if he flipped over?
How big was that basket?
Big enough to
How big is a
crocodile couldn't get his
3-month-old?
mouth.
Could be good size.
I don't know.
Pretty big.
It was covered, wasn't it?
Well,
It doesn't say.
no,
Just said it was a basket? What does it say?
a table.
Yeah, they opened
It was
it.
like they looked in, maybe.
It was a basket coated with tar and pitch.
Yeah.
She opened it and saw the table.
So there must have been some kind of a lid to it.
That was a
And I'm sure the baby maybe slept because of the waves a little bit,
Right.
but then you get hungry,
Yep.
which is often, or you have a dirty diaper, start screaming. And Pharaoh's daughter saw it. You ever have a trivia question? Who got Moses out?
Slaves.
Sister.
The slave did, not, a lot of people say, well, Pharaoh's daughter did. No, he didn't.
No,
She said, go and get it, remember? She was Pharaoh's daughter, she didn't work.
she didn't work.
But the fact that God saw to it that his sister was there, who's his sister, by the way?
Miriam.
Miriam. And the fact that Pharaoh's daughter allowed Moses' mom
To
to nurse it and raise it. And then God was with Moses when Moses went to Pharaoh's house. Every step of the way, you see God's hand there, and took care of him.
Yeah, even with Pharaoh's daughter, that at that time, right then, and in that place where the baby was, is where she went down to bathe. I mean, Egyptians did this all the time.
You know, people say, well, it was by chance. It was. I think God led Moses' mom and sister to pick that spot. God was behind it all. How'd you know it was a Hebrew?
Well,
It
there's
was
a
hid for one
difference.
thing.
Was that?
It was hid for one thing.
It was hid for one thing. Maybe she recognized
They looked
a basket
different.
that Egyptians made. Maybe the clothing he had on. More than likely, he looked different.
Child.
Wouldn't he have been circumcised as an Israelite?
No. Oh, yeah, I'm trying to think of where Abraham played. He would have been circumcised too.
Checked it out.
Not everybody got circumcised back then, a little different than today. But back then, the only ones who got circumcised were Jews unless there was some medical condition for it. Now it's kind of the reverse. Of course, they're going back and forth in that all the time too. It's like everything. Do you nurse children today?
Today it's good.
And what do they say now? I just read an article where it says mothers should nurse their children for a year, at least. Helps them fight off infections and all these other things. And Anyways, do you have any questions?
The government says.
We get to hear about the burning bush, which is another interesting thing. Well, we'll close then with the prayer that we have here. Gracious Lord, when the future seems bleak and uncertain, remind us of your faithfulness and love. Although we may not know what the future holds, we know that you hold the future. In our Savior's name we pray, amen. We have a good day. Don't be too snowed in later.
Is it gonna snow?
Yeah, tonight.
I think we're supposed